Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Politics here at The Hindu with me, Nistula Hebbar, where we unpack the news making the headlines in domestic politics. This week saw a lot of historic problems plaguing the Northeast being sorted to a certain degree. We saw a border agreement being concluded between Assam and Meghalaya. 6 out of the 12 disputed points in terms of border settlement between these two states was concluded in an agreement between the two state chief ministers in New Delhi. This was a dispute that had been going on for the last 50 years, so it was a historic sort of an achievement. After that, of course, there was also the announcement that the number of areas falling under the draconian Armed Forces Special Powers Act would be reduced in the three states in the northeast, namely Manipur, Assam and Nagaland, bringing a lot of relief to those areas. This is again a historic reduction. We are looking forward to more and more areas, of course, being out of the purview of this act. It looked as though the Northeast was on a particular trajectory in trying to sort out some historic grievances, some historic sticking points and problems between the center and the state, and between the states with intra-state sort of issues that were going on. But we also saw in Punjab, in the northwest of the country, a special session of the Punjab Assembly called by the new government there, headed by the Aam Aadmi Party, where a resolution, probably the seventh in a row, that was passed by that assembly, reiterating the claim of Punjab as a state over its capital, joint capital of Chandigarh, joint capital which it holds with the state of Haryana. This is something that came out after many years, an issue that has been hanging fire for a very long time, and it came out after many years. So this episode of Talking Politics will be looking at what were the triggers that gave rise to this repeated demand, and or the rising of this demand again, what is the history of this demand, and what can we hope to see in the future. While the question of Chandigarh being claimed by Punjab harks back to the 1960s, when the Hindi-speaking areas were carved into the states of Haryana from the original, the unified, undivided Punjab Suba, and some areas, the hilly areas, were taken out as Himachal Pradesh. It flared up last week after Union Home Minister Amit Shah announced that the notification of the Central Services Rules for employees serving in the Union Territory of Chandigarh, instead of these employees following the Punjab service rules. This political leaders, other than those of the BJP, felt would dilute the claims of Punjab over Chandigarh as a city, as a capital for which they claimed for itself, separate from that of Haryana. The centre had earlier also changed rules for the selection criteria of the Bhakra Beas Management Board members, the BBMB, which is a statutory body under the Punjab Reorganisation Act of 1966 and manages the water resources of Satluj and Beas, has a whole-time chairman and 2 members, member irrigation, member power. According to the convention, the member power is always from Punjab and the member irrigation is from Haryana, and they are selected from a panel of senior engineers. But the change in the rules for selection allowed anyone from across the country to apply for these posts. This was again felt by the Punjab government as an attack on the federal structure, on its own rights over the Bhakra Beas Management Board, which had been part of the Reorganisation Act of 1966, and they felt that the centre was exceeding its brief and encroaching into areas which the state had under its purview, and giving privileges of the state to the centre, or arrogating privileges of the state to itself by the centre. Now, the city of Chandigarh, let's just go into a little bit of the history of the city of Chandigarh. The city of Chandigarh was built in 1953. It was inaugurated by then President Rajendra Prasad in 1953. It was envisaged as a modern capital for Punjab, which had suffered a lot during the partition. More than half of Punjab's territory went into the new country of Pakistan, along with its bustling capital of Lahore, which again went to Pakistan. For some time after partition, Shimla had functioned as the capital for the Punjab Suba, but in the 1950s it was felt by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, that then Prime Minister, that Punjab deserved a modern capital, and famous architect Le Corbusier was commissioned by the government of India to create this new capital in Punjab. In 1966, under the Punjab Reorganisation Act, however, the states of Punjab and Haryana, as I said before, Haryana had been carved out from the Hindi-speaking areas of the Punjab Suba, and Chandigarh was designated as a joint capital for both these states, and Chandigarh itself, the city itself, was designated as a union territory under the control of the centre. The government properties in Chandigarh were divided in a 60-40 ratio between the states of Punjab and Haryana, Punjab getting 60%, Haryana getting 40%, and therefore that's how it stood. But there was always dissatisfaction among Punjabis, who felt that the creation of these new states and the taking over or the sharing of its capital and the general administration of the capital going to the centre was again an encroachment on its rights over its own territory, and a Punjab Suba movement had arisen over this dissatisfaction. In 1970, therefore, reacting to this movement, then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said that Haryana should be making a new capital for itself, that there should be one for Haryana separately from Punjab, and Chandigarh should remain with Punjab. Haryana was given 10 crore rupees for this purpose, and also given a loan of like amount was offered for the building of this new capital. 5 years' time was given to Haryana to vacate Chandigarh and to move into a capital of its own, but that didn't happen. And the sense of grievance in Punjab kept simmering over the issue, over the Reorganisation Act. And in 1982, Akali Dal, along with Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, launched the Dharm Yudh Morcha to realize the aims of the Anandpur Sahib resolution, which pertained to getting back all the territory that the Suba of Punjab had lost with the Reorganisation Act, and to get back Chandigarh as a full-time, fully administered by state government capital of Punjab. This happened in the backdrop of militancy and a lot of violence that occurred in the 1980s. In 1985, in fact, when the Rajiv Gandhi Harcharan Singh Longowal Accord was signed in the backdrop of militancy, it addressed the issue of Chandigarh reverting to Punjab as the full-time capital of the state. And January 26, 1986 was the the deadline given for this reversion to happen, except that within 2 months of signing this accord, Harcharan Singh Longowal was unfortunately assassinated, and the matter still hung fire over that. Again, the matter kind of lay beneath the surface in all of these years as Punjab dealt with militancy and its aftermath. Friday's resolution, in reaction to the Home Ministry's action, as I said before, is the 7th resolution by the Punjab Assembly demanding or reiterating the claim of Punjab over Chandigarh. The resolution itself, which was passed in Punjab Assembly and moved by Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann, the new Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann, reads as follows: for maintaining harmony and taking sentiments of people into account, this House once again recommends to the state government to raise the matter with the central government to immediately transfer Chandigarh to Punjab. The Aam Aadmi Party's basic point for moving this resolution was that whenever a new state is carved out from a larger, older state, the older state gets to retain the capital city. This is what happened when Jharkhand was created. By dividing Bihar, Patna remained with Bihar and Ranchi became Jharkhand's capital. Between Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh retained Bhopal, Chhattisgarh had to create a new capital of Raipur, and also in Uttarakhand, the new capital was Dehradun, and Uttar Pradesh, from which Uttarakhand had been separated, retained Lucknow as its capital. This was the basic argument given by the Aam Aadmi Party. Now, Haryana, as a reaction to it, was having none of it. Chief Minister Manohar Lal Khattar was very clear that this was a one-sided resolution, that stakeholders needed to talk it out. And the Haryana government's long-standing demand has anyway remained that they require a separate high court for themselves, because right now they are shared. There is a high court which is termed the Punjab and Haryana High Court, so it's a shared high court. With such a long history to just where the city of Chandigarh belongs, for it to rise again and again is not just because it's an old issue and there was a trigger in terms of what the Union Home Ministry did in terms of service rules and the Bhakra Beas Management Board, but also the fact that there is a new party on the horizon, the Aam Aadmi Party, which has won power in Punjab, and therefore these legacy issues will be sought to be addressed in a new politics that is emerging from that area. The Aam Aadmi Party also looks at BJP as its main political rival on the national scale. So therefore, old questions will therefore be raised, old scabs will be picked over, with only the future holding the answer of just where the chips would fall and whether Chandigarh would revert to Punjab or be maintained in a kind of status quo limbo. This is all I have for you this week. Thanks a lot for watching.